Okay, thank you. The chair recognizes Ash Hall. Ash, I have you here on behalf of yourself and ACLU of Texas registered against the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, go ahead.
We are seriously concerned about this bill. We see it as an unconstitutional attempt to treat medical care for transgender Texans differently from all other types of medical care in the state. Although the ACLU of Texas would actually welcome an extension of the statute of limitations for all medical malpractice claims, creating an extension only for medical care that is necessary to alleviate the symptoms of gender dysphoria unconstitutionally and unlawfully discriminates against trans youth and makes our state less equal and a less welcoming place. Because the legislature has already enacted SB 14, which of course prohibits gender-affirming care for minors in Texas, the purpose of this bill seems to be to further enshrine anti-trans discrimination into law. There's no medical or practical reason to treat malpractice claims for gender-affirming care differently from all other types of malpractice. In the event that SB 14 is rescinded, nullified, or modified in the future, House Bill 1088 would increase legal liability for doctors or hospitals that provide gender-affirming care, and that cost could be passed on to insurers and taxpayers, which is a fascinating, in a negative sense, way of shooting oneself in the foot to try to aim a gun at the face of a very small community. There's really no reason to change the statute of limitations only for a single type of medical care, particularly when the provision of that care is already banned in Texas. As the U.S. Supreme Court and other courts across the country deliberate over the constitutionality of bans on medical care for the treatment of gender dysphoria among trans youth, we urge this committee to not pass this bill or further enshrine anti-trans discrimination into law. Worth noting, as far as I've seen, we make up about 1% of the population. The rate of regret within that community is less than 1%. Again, we're open to extending those liability periods for all types of medical care, but to just do it, especially for a type of care that has such a low rate of regret, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And it does make it a lot easier, frankly, to sue over this bill should it become law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. Just so I can, you just referenced some raw numbers there. Did you say that the community total represents 1% of the total population?
About, yeah.
And
Last I checked.
And so what is that 1% number? I just want to understand what you just said. It's 1% of
The Texas population, but also that can be applied to the U.S. as well.
Right. Let's just talk Texas general population.
Sure.
So 1% of 31 million people is 310,000. Am I doing my math correct or no? I'm not. How many people total are you? So, and then it's 1% of that experiences
Any type of regret. And yeah, I don't actually know what that number would come out to, the math on that. I don't have those numbers in front of me. But suffice to say, it is a pretty small number. And we've done a lot of studies on this. We've done a lot of talking to people about this. The few folks that do have regret about this usually cite discrimination and public pressure and rejection by family as the reasons that they regret the care that they've gotten. It's not to actually do with the care itself. So really, instead of a bill like this, what I'd love to see is eventually rescinding SB 14, expanding healthcare access for all sorts of different Texans, including trans Texans. If you want to extend the liability period, let's do that for all medical care. You'll have to have a really interesting conversation with the insurance folks about that.
I understand. I want to just kind of drill down onto this bill. I think my math was correct. 310,000 is 1% of the total population, and then 1% of that,
Right.
According to what you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, Ash, 1% of that would be the population that might, to use your word, quote, regret.
Yeah.
That's 3,100 Texans.
I think that math is correct.
Yeah, I think it is too, unless
you
my
take away enough
calculator on my
zeros.
phone is broken. But
Yeah.
I'm not a math guy. But
Same.
so that's still to me a lot of Texans, 3,100 Texans who underwent a procedure or a treatment as a minor, and then at a later point are, again using your term, regretting or wishing to that things were different, maybe wanting to detransition or whatever. 3,100 to me is not an insignificant number.
And I hear that. And it should be noted that of that population, not all of them necessarily want to actually medically detransition or even socially. That regret piece, again, a lot of that's about the discrimination that we're facing after we've transitioned. That doesn't necessarily mean we're looking to change anything. We would rather see society change to be a more accepting and welcoming place for us, rather than have to change our bodies back into a form they were recently in, where we felt not at home in our bodies, where we felt gender dysphoria, anxiety, all of the things that come with that.
I understand.
The other thing worth mentioning, sir, if I may.
Absolutely.
If this bill causes insurance companies to stop covering care altogether for treatments for gender dysphoria, then maybe there's some care for that, 3,000? 300,000?
3,100
Thank you.
Texans, according to the numbers you gave.
Gotcha.
Or the
Gotcha.
amount of
So
Texans.
what you may be doing here is you may be trading care for 3,100 people against about 300,000 people who may no longer receive care. And so with that in mind, you really can't call this like a healthcare expansion bill if the net effect is that more people lose healthcare than gain it.
Well, I want to, I understand your point. I want to make sure we stay focused on this bill. I actually have another piece of legislation that I filed that addresses that would require any insurance company that covers transition treatment to also be required to cover detransition treatment for those 3,100 Texans that might wish to do so. But I just wanted to understand your numbers, so that we as a committee have a perspective of kind of what the population that we're talking about that could potentially benefit from a bill like this.
Yeah, so long as you understand there's also a much greater number of people that could potentially be harmed by it. Sure. That's the important thing that we want to drive home to you all today.
Well, you've appeared in front of our committee before. You're always welcome here, and I always enjoy hearing from you and your perspective and your testimony. I hope you feel welcomed by this committee, and even though we might disagree on some issues, you always do a great and professional job, and so I appreciate that.
Thanks, sir.
Members, are there any other questions for the witness? Yes, Representative Gonzalez.
Ash, can you explain the process the person has to go through in order to receive hormone therapy?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that folks are looking at is persistence and consistence around gender identity, gender dysphoria, so on and so forth. This is not a decision that's made lightly. It's not the kind of thing where somebody decides one day they might be a different gender identity than what they were assigned at birth, and then the next week they go and they start on hormones. This is something that takes time, and it's a conversation between patients and doctors, oftentimes close friends or family members. There's usually a number of people that get to have conversations with this patient before that decision is made. And generally, there's a piece involved that has to do with therapy and having a psychologist or psychotherapist note that this is gender dysphoria and recommend that this person be allowed hormones or be allowed to transition, which there's mixed feelings in the community about that, but nonetheless, that is one more way that we are ensuring as a whole that this is the course of action that makes sense.
So does that happen in just one appointment with the doctor?
Nope.
That decision? Okay.
You can't claim consistence and persistence if you're doing that in just one appointment.
And in what situations would someone decide to detransition aside from just regret?
What other situations besides regret would someone decide?
We're talking about people who detransition, and it's a very small percentage or a very small portion of a small percentage already. Can you speak to a situation where somebody would choose to detransition, not because of just regret, or I regret ever taking, do you understand my question?
I think I do. I mean, I know that there are people that are forced to. I mean, especially there may be young people that are forced to by unsupportive families. The sort of trade-off where the only way that you'll keep a roof over your head or be allowed to go to school, things like that, is contingent upon stopping care around gender dysphoria. That would usually be something you would see in like the older side of our youth, because as it is in the past, parents were generally there every step of the way for youth, certainly at younger ages and older. So I think it could come down to that if basically there was no choice in the matter. But beyond that, I don't know of many reasons why somebody would choose to do that. And as it is, like, I know probably a couple thousand trans people at this point, and I think I know of maybe one person, at least who's from Texas, that's ever detransitioned. And it sounded like a lot of what that individual went through had to do with probably malpractice on the part of the doctor, and not so much the care as a whole, or even that person facing discrimination, though I don't know their full story.
Because my understanding is, when I've heard of, folks that, and it's not necessarily by choice, right? It's, folks who, maybe they're, the older population, right? That
Yeah.
may be in, let's say, like a nursing home. Did it stop working? A nursing home, or, something like that, where they don't have access to that medication, that the medications that they were taking prior to that.
You're right.
So it's not by choice, right? It's just that they don't have access to it anymore.
You're right, good catch. I completely forgot about that part of the surveys and the studies. Yeah, there are people who detransition not because they want to, but because they run out of options for care. And it could be because of a nursing facility. It could be a different kind of insurance. It could be all sorts of different reasons. But yeah, you do have to account for that as well when you're thinking about people who detransition. How much of that is because they actually want to, and how much of that is because they don't have another choice?
And so, like, the way that the bill references, this is how I'm assuming that it's referring to, what it says drugs, so it's referring to hormone therapy.
Right.
And then it describes it as gender modification drugs, which I feel like is a mischaracterization of what it actually does. Because, these it doesn't, and I'm not trying to be funny, but it doesn't, well, if you take these if you're on hormone therapy, you don't grow a limb, or your limbs don't, or they don't fall off, right? Can you talk a little bit about the permanency of, the effects that if somebody were to stop taking hormone therapy, or get off hormone therapy, if you're able to speak to that?
Yeah, very little ends up being permanent, and that's part of why, for example, when you're looking at the population of trans people in prison, for example, we fight very hard for them to continue receiving care, because they will start to experience physical changes upon losing access to that care. So, for example, if you're a trans man, that can mean the end of you growing facial hair. Just one example. But yeah, kind of similar to like puberty blockers, though I would argue that's even more reversible. A lot of what we see with hormones is not forever. It's not irreversible, and that's part of why the community continues to take hormones for as long as we do.
And one last question. Can you speak to minors receiving surgeries and how common that is?
It's not. That wasn't even really a thing before SB 14, and it's certainly not a thing now. But no, generally you wait until you're 18 or older, because the idea, again, is this is supposed to be a journey, and those journeys take time. And I'm sure like some of our youth wish that they could have surgery sooner, but they have to wait. And that is okay, because there's HRT, hormone replacement therapy, there's social transition, there's other ways to go on this journey before they make that decision together with their families and their doctors.
And even when somebody is of age, or right, they're 18, and there's still a process a person has to go through.
Correct.
After that too, right? You don't just go into the doctor and say, hey, I want to get the surgery. There's, and I don't know how long that takes, but that's still a process, even when you are an adult, right?
It is, right. Nothing, to use the most professional term I can think of, nothing is done willy-nilly. It's all very, it's well thought out. There's a lot of room in there for patients to take their time to consider the decisions that they're making, to read about what to expect, and to know what to look out for so they can go back to that doctor all of that stuff. It's all very conscientious, laid out, thoughtful. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, members, any other questions for the witnesses? Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.